Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Josh.
Hey, good morning.
Reverend John.
Hey, I'm bringing my Cardiff to you.
Good morning.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
I'm serious.
Oh, forgot. Good morning, Bob. Hey, Steve. Steve Buckingham's here. Hey.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hey, Dennis. Hey, Liz.
Good morning. I don't think you need it. Good morning.
Good morning, Charlie.
Hey,
Good morning,
Nicole.
Hey, Louise.
Morning.
Randy.
Good morning.
Morning.
John. Hey, Benita.
Morning, Mr. Jones.
Hey, Benita.
Hi, Nicole.
Thanks, Sandy.
Morning.
Hi,
Hey,
Louise.
Roy.
Morning, Norris family. John. Hey, John.
Hello.
They talking to me? I don't know.
Hush.
The minister's named John.
You got to be specific.
Hey, Sandy.
There's a hospice out here.
Here.
Hush, you hush. Hush. No, go down.
Hey, Ann.
This is my cup, I think.
She.
Oh.
No, there's you.
Audrey. In the client.
Good morning.
Audrey, I need to know when you're actually being heard.
Alita. Come on.
Okay?
No.
So it's important.
I have
that
my
you're
camera
telling
off.
me.
You're looking for my off.
You
I got my camera cover on.
Hi, Egna family.
Yes, that's a cute little adventure piece.
Hey, Ann.
Comfy chair. Yeah. Camera's on.
Hey, Stan.
Hi, everybody.
Morning.
Morning. Morning.
Hi.
Good morning. Let us now begin the service and mute all. We'll unmute myself. We welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Annapolis. I'm Reverend John Cresswell, serving as one of your ministers along with Anastasia Zinke. And also serving on this service are the BBC, the Building Beloved Community. This is their service. And also Joshua Long has provided scintillating, powerful music for us this morning. This is going to be a wonderful service. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Please keep in mind that when you're unmuted, we can hear what's going on in your background, so be mindful of that. We now prepare our hearts and minds for worship. And next slide. I think if you are new to the congregation, you've been here once or twice, we invite you to acknowledge yourself in the chat. And also, we will put up a link for you to fill out a form so that we can stay in touch with you, send our weekly In the Know to you. We welcome you. Let us prepare our hearts and minds for worship as we light our chalice together.
Take this moment to light your chalice or virtual chalice as I share these words of Edward Hale, a UU minister and historian. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do.
And now we're going to have our opening song, which I do have on by Written Fingers.
to be free. I wish I could break all the chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things that I should say. Say I'm loud, say I'm clear for the whole world to hear. Say I'm loud, say I'm clear for the whole world to hear.
I wish I could share all the love that's in my heart. Remove all the bars that keep us so far apart. I wish you could know what it means to be me. And then you'd see and agree that everyone should be free. And then you'd see and agree that everyone should be free. Oh,
I wish I could give all I'm longing to give. I wish I could live like I'm longing to live. I wish I could do all the things that I could do. Though I'm way overdue, I'd be starting anew. Though I'm way overdue, I'd be starting anew. Well, I wish I could be like a bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found I could fly. I soar to the sun and look down at the sea. Then I sing, 'cause I know how it feels to be free. Then I sing, 'cause I know how it feels to be free. Free, free, oh free. I wanna know how it feels to be free. Oh free, 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 how it feels. I wanna know, oh free, how it feels, how it feels, how it feels. I wanna know how it feels to be free, 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 oh free, how it feels. I wanna know, yeah, how it feels to be free.
I'm not open the wonder box. What's in there? What's that?
A voter registration application.
Luce, why is it important that we vote?
It's important that we vote because it's fair, and when you vote, you're voting for something. Say we were voting for a new store, if it should be a grocery store or a movie theater, say. You would vote because if 10 people think it should be a movie theater and 5 people think it should be a grocery store, then the one with the most votes gets. Because if we didn't have voting, then anything would be fair, and it would not be fun, because there would be way more arguments.
Then
when I've gone with my parents, I think they give you a slip for what they like their names and what they believe and everything they do and stuff. And you can decide by what you believe and what you care about.
That is. How you know the other right person is you. If there's nice to people, you know they're the right person. But if they're not nice to people, you know they're not the right person. And you know,
Important for there to be someone that speaks for us.
because if there's someone that speaks for us, there won't be someone to make decisions, and everything would just be lawless.
Okay.
If you do it, do this.
James, why is it important to exercise our right to vote as American citizens?
So people can say if they don't like a president.
So people can say if they don't like the president?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the government can know. So the America can know that if they think they're a good president or not.
So that the government can know if, from who? Who tells them if they're a good president or not?
The people.
The people. Okay.
You will answer the question. If no one's... James, are you listening? James, okay. Say, if no one can speak for you, no one can stand up for you and keep you from being hurt.
Why is it important to vote?
It's very important to vote because even though voting might not change the world you live in, many people have problems with the world they live in, and they want change for the better. Because of this, it's very important that you hear what they have to say and vote for things that you feel are right for others and not just yourself.
You're almost 18.
Yeah, I'm gonna vote this out right now.
I first became aware of Ida B. Wells back in the 60s when I was at University of Maryland studying history. She had a mention as a muckraker. Muckraker, I thought, although at the time when first used was meant to be pejorative, to me it sounded like a definite positive. She was someone who was raking up the muck of oppression and injustice. As it turns out, she was an avid opponent of lynching, and in fact, Ida B. Wells was a complete badass. Although she was better known for her decades-long anti-lynching campaign, she nonetheless was a giant in the women's suffrage movement. Undaunted when she was told that she could not march at the front line of the suffrage march of 1915, she nonetheless inserted herself right up front. I would say that she was one who most definitely stayed in John Lewis's good trouble. In her autobiography, she states, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." And it does seem to me that notwithstanding all these social agencies, there is not that vigilance which should be exercised in the preservation of our rights. This leads me to wonder if we are not too well satisfied to be able to point to our wonderful institutions with complacence therewith, instead of being alert as the watchman on the wall. In the words of Dr. Susan Frederick Gray, president of the UUA, voter mobilization is not just political. For Unitarian Universalists, this is faithful, moral action, because democracy and the right of all people to have a voice and a vote are at the very heart of our 7 principles. This work is about the inherent worth and dignity of every person. It is about restoring right relationship with the planet. It is about our commitment to justice and equity for all people. We are called to courageously embody the deepest values of our faith with our hearts, bodies, and spirits, while building toward an abundant future in which all are free and flourishing. What happens in November 2020 matters, and what we do today will shape what happens on Election Day. Our voices, our values, our willingness to show up right now. We are small, but we are mighty. And that mighty love and spirit-centered courage is exactly what is needed today. May we summon the vigilance and courage to make good trouble as we move into our election season.
I want to take us back to the Wonder Box and give Dr. Oba Cabone a chance to share. So we moved a little too fast. Forgive us, Olga.
Good morning. Suppressing the Black vote is a very old story in America, and it has never been just a Southern thing. It affects millions of Black and brown people all over the US. Used as a barrier and a strategic tactic, our local and federal government has passed and maintained laws that purposefully disenfranchise specific racial and ethnic groups from voting. Ignoring or staying silent violates our 5th and 8th principles to uphold the use of the democratic process and to dismantle racism in ourselves and in our institution. Today's service will spotlight the history of voter suppression, both nationally and locally, and provide you with the steps you can take to challenge these laws and practices. When we all vote, we demand change. When we all vote, our voices are heard. When we all vote, we choose leaders who speak for us. When we all vote, we become activists for equality.
Thank you, Dr. Cabone. And now we get to listen to another piece that Josh put together for this service.
Southern tree, bear a strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black bodies swinging in the sun. Strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolias, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to the tree to dry. Here is a strange and
Many, if not most, of the founding fathers were opposed to representative democracy. Many, if not most, of the founding fathers were opposed to representative democracy. Alexander Hamilton said that not all of a community's interests should be represented in the legislature. No idea is more erroneous than this. He said, only such interests are proper to be represented as are involved in the powers of the general government, such as commerce, taxation, and the like. In Federalist Paper number 10, James Madison saw the threat of majoritarian tyranny if the various community interests were represented directly. He wanted only the ruling class to be elected so that men of superior talents whose wisdom may discern the true interests of the country rather than yield to temporary or partial considerations of the people. In the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, it says the House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen by the people of the several states. By going to the state constitutions of the 13 states, you find that it was almost universally true that only white male property owners were allowed to vote. Some states had additional restrictions, such as the requirement to belong to certain Christian denominations. So who was excluded? Women, enslaved Africans, indentured servants, and others that did not own property. Who have I left out? Oh yes, the people living here before arrival of the Europeans. Our founders ignored that these people even existed. This means that voter qualifications in the federal elections are determined by each state, and this is still with us, aside from a few notable exceptions which Congress enacted later. But even in this environment, there was reason for hope. A Mr. Smith of New York, a delegate to the Constitutional Congress, was notable as one of the few proponents of a wider representation of people who occupied lower social and economic classes. Smith argued that representation should be a microcosm of the whole population. That way, legislators would hear about their circumstances and wants, and therefore more likely to consider all needs of the citizens. Unless steps are taken to remedy this, we will have a government of the natural aristocracy. So Smith said steps had to be taken to make a place for the general population in legislatures. A government controlled by the few and great would be for the masses a government of oppression. Smith was pointing the way toward our first innate principles, that all have dignity and respect, and we should work to resist oppression. We draw inspiration from him today.
It's me. Nope. Am I on? During
During the next century, states gradually began to drop many of their earlier voting requirements, like religious affiliation. However, elite landowners wanting to maintain political power held on to some restrictions to separate themselves from the general population. This process would eventually lead to an era of extreme voter suppression that occurred after the Civil War. During Reconstruction, Southern African Americans mobilized to become actively involved in the electoral process, calling for full and legal and political rights. The 15th Amendment stated that the right to vote could not be denied because of race. The subsequent elections resulted in newly enfranchised African American men to be elected and serve in many delegations nationwide, including 16 in the U.S. Congress and more than 600 in the state legislatures during the late 1800s. Alarmed and fearing a loss of power, many of the white population engaged in an oppressive backlash for a century. Carol Anderson, in her One Person, No Vote book, quoted a newspaper editor from that time period who said, "No Negro is fit to make laws for white people." Jim Crow laws like literacy tests, poll taxes, and other repressions began to reduce the voter population. Mississippi had about 147,000 eligible African American voters, yet fewer than 9,000 were registered after 1890. However, Black freedmen still voted in large numbers and were elected into offices. Infuriated whites formed vigilante terrorist groups like the Ku Klux Klan and later even more open militant ones like the White League in Louisiana and red shirt chapters in the Carolinas, to name a few. Their goal was to get their political opposition out of office at any cost. The White Line Rifle Clubs were reported to be responsible for 150 Blacks killed before the 1876 election. Although 2 Black men served early in the U.S. Senate, it would be another 100 years before another African American would be voted in. How many African American senators have served since the Revolutionary War? Put a number in your head. Only 10. 10. This too is an impact of voter suppression. Meanwhile, since 1848, white women like Susan B. Anthony were involved in the suffrage movement. Other voices had been supportive. Frederick Douglass, a former Maryland slave and activist who worked tirelessly for decades for women's suffrage with white abolitionists, along with Black women like Ida B. Wells. Unfortunately, it wasn't until 1920 that the women's suffrage finally became law. The long history of disenfranchisement finally exploded to a national focus with the 1965 March in Selma, Alabama, to support voting rights. Here, the nation saw a peaceful march of many Black and white citizens erupt into an inhumane act of violence by law enforcement. Known as Bloody Sunday, it was televised nationally, which motivated many whites to become involved. Martin Luther King's Jr. call to our UUA for support resulted in more UU ministers in attendance than any other denomination. We showed up. Also present was a young minister, James Grieve, who answered the call. He was beaten and died 2 days later. Finally, later that year, the groundbreaking 1965 Voter Rights Act was passed. The Voting Rights Act made it illegal for any state to use many of the practices that had been in play to suppress votes. And it required a pre-clearance clause to require states to report any changes they wish to make in their voting rights laws in the future. During that following years, many improvements occurred, adding better voting accommodations, along with a much higher participation from the marginalized populations. However, 48 years later, June 2013, the Supreme Court decided that pre-clearance requirements were no longer necessary. The clause was removed and now states are less accountable. Meanwhile, during the 1900s, an increasing number of diverse social justice organizations formed, national groups like the NAACP, the ACLU, CORE, and other state and local groups like our now UU Legislative Ministry, continued to work to hold America accountable. I am a member of several groups, the UU Legislative Ministry and others, some of the others like this. We all expect and we work for America to stand for liberty and justice for all. Now our nation is experiencing other strategies that are being used to suppress voting rights, and Ellen Burkhoff will highlight them next. Thank you.
Imagine that you're an African-American voter going to the polls in Georgia in November 2018. You're not allowed to vote because the middle name on your driver's license is spelled Jesse with an E, but the voter rolls have it down as Jess. Of the people not allowed to vote because of this law, 80% are Black. Or suppose that you're a Native American trying to vote in the North Dakota election. Your ID lacks your street address, as do many IDs for people who live on tribal land. Under the law enacted in North Dakota in 2017, you're out of luck. In Texas, your gun license is a valid form of ID, but your state university ID is not. The majority of Texas gun owners are white. Over 50% of the students in the University of Texas system are ethnic or racial minorities. Are you sensing a pattern here? Voter suppression in the present is alive and well. Photo ID laws, wholesale voter registration record purges, early voting cutbacks, and equitable distribution of polling places. All of these fall most heavily on the poor and the marginalized, requiring both time and money to overcome. And while most of these laws don't represent an insurmountable barrier to voting for an individual, the extra effort it takes to deal with them can suppress voting enough to tip an election. Who's more likely to vote? The person who lives down the street from a polling place or a person several miles away? A person who can vote early or the person who has to wait in line for more than an hour after work? According to the new voter suppression published by the Brennan Center for Justice and the source of most of the examples I just gave, race continues to play a key role in the voting process. The racial components of new voting restrictions are still here, but they are more subtle. To quote civil rights activist Reverend William Barber II, Jim Crow did not retire. He went to law school and launched a second career. Meet James Crow Esquire. Gerrymandering is also alive and well. Once every 10 years, the party in power has a chance to waste the other party's votes when they redraw the electoral maps. Richard Pildes, quoted in Thomas Edsfull's recent New York Times opinion piece, says that gerrymandering is about as pure an example as we have of insiders rigging the system for their own benefit. It also poisons state legislatures when the decade begins with one party ramming down the throat of the other a manipulative map that affects the state for a decade. Most voting law is state law. States can make voting easier or harder. And while the states whose voting plans were formerly supervised federally under the Voting Rights Act have made it harder to vote for people of color, new citizens, the poor, and the elderly, the good news is that organizations in those states are fighting back in the courts. The perfectly matching name law in Georgia, most of it was overturned in 2019 after a suit brought by 6 stakeholder organizations, including the Georgia chapter of the NAACP and Asian Americans Promoting Justice. In each state with voter suppression laws, Grassroots organizations and state chapters of national entities like the ACLU have banded together to sue for redress state by state. So, yes, we're fighting back. Going through the court sometimes succeeds, working together to enforce the protections that still remain in the Voting Rights Act and prevent its further erosion by ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, and other conservative organizations is important. We should support groups working on it with our time and money. But there's another way to extend voting rights, and that is to vote for the candidates who support them and then pester those who get elected until they get those rights codified into law. So be brave, be a nudge, be generous, and make sure that we make the path to voting smooth for all. And now Nicole Bruno will bring us home.
Thank you. Good morning. Daryl, Candy, and Ellen have taken you on a journey. You have traveled with them through our history, perhaps unlearning the false story we grew up hearing that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. History is not often told through the eyes of the disenfranchised. I wish the future wasn't so uncertain. I wish I could tell you that new voter suppression tactics, such as reducing the opportunities to vote by mail, reducing the number of early voting days, and reducing the number of polling sites in minority communities, were not actively happening. I wish that we were not finding new ways to repeat history, such as maintaining and creating laws preventing people who have been convicted of felonies from getting voting rights back, reminiscent of a three-fifths compromise, which lessens people's inherent worth as citizens of this country. The active attempts to manipulate census data could have ripple effect for a generation, as data is only collected every 10 years, further enabling gerrymandering and the disproportionate allocations of federal funding to communities that already have generational wealth and power on their side. If you're anything like me, you might be feeling overwhelmed. What do we do with all of this? Being challenged and overwhelmed is often paralyzing, and this can seem an insurmountable uphill battle towards change. That is a normal, okay feeling to feel. However, that paralyzed feeling is gently nudging us to realize that this is actually deeply spiritual, loving work. Dr. M. Scott Peck, author of The Road Less Traveled, defines love as the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. When we feel fear or anger or disempowered or paralyzed, respecting, listening, and processing those feelings is how we grow, because unfortunately, we generally don't grow when we are comfortable. So I'm going to ask you to do two things, and these two things are not things we always make time for. I'm going to ask you to reflect on the UU principles, and I'm going to encourage you to use your imagination. We cannot control the future, however, we can affect it. In the words of Glennon Doyle, author of Untamed, quote, "The truest, most beautiful life never promises to be an easy one," unquote. She goes on to discuss how discontentment is the nagging of the imagination, a reminder that we, even as adults, still have the capacity to imagine. The UU principles are not only a guide, but an example of the use of our imagination. Can we imagine a world where every person had inherent worth and dignity? That there is justice, equity, and compassion in human relations? That we all have the right of conscience and access to the use of the democratic process? That everyone can live with peace, liberty, and justice for all? Love, if defined by nurturing spiritual growth, is an action, an activity that implies commitment and conscious choice. It is easy to be paralyzed, but our guiding principles, including respecting the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, compels us to take action and imagine a better, more loving, and equitable future. Some tangible action steps you may be able to take include continuing to educate yourself and others, verifying your name still remains on the voting rolls, knowing your designated polling site and assisting others to get to their polling site, volunteering at your polling center, ensuring that your state representatives support early voting, hold our state representatives accountable to not reduce the number of polling sites in minority communities, and pressure U.S. Congress to update and restore the Power of Voting Rights Act. And finally, supporting organizations that actively promote ending partisan gerrymandering by creating citizen-led commissions to redraw congressional districts via organizations such as All on the Line, the Brennan Center for Justice, and the ACLU. I'm going to hand this off to Kristen Muncher, head of the UUCA chapter of UU the Vote, to provide you with some further action steps that are being organized within our community. But I wish to leave you with one more quote from the chapter Imagination in Untamed. It is hard to jump from dreaming to doing. As every architect and designer knows, there is a critical step between vision and reality. Before imagination becomes three-dimensional, it usually needs to become two-dimensional. We can stop asking what the world wants for us and instead what we want for the world. Let's conjure up from our souls the most beautiful lives we can imagine, the truest, most beautiful world we can hope for, and let's put it all on paper. Let's look what we have written and decide that these are not pipe dreams, these are our marching orders. These are the blueprints for our lives and our families. May our dreams become our plans. May it be so.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to start out with an excerpt from a fantastic poem that I would urge you to look up and listen to. It is written by Amanda Gorman, the first National Youth Poet Laureate. And it goes like this. There's a poem in this place, a poem in America, a poet in every American, who rewrites this nation, who tells a story worthy of being told on this minnow of an earth, to breathe hope into a palimpsest of time, a poet in every American who sees that our poem penned doesn't mean our poems end. There's a place where this poem dwells. It is here, it is now, in this yellow song of dawn's bell, where we write an American lyric we are just beginning to tell. And to go back to what Nicole says, this is the year when the maps are going to be redrawn. And so we are at an emergency situation here where we all need to come together to make sure we have people in power who are going to draw the lines fairly. And we're going to look at the next slide now and talk about what we can do about that. All right, so I would urge you to take a picture of this while it's on your screen in case you have any questions. So tonight we're kicking off UU the Vote at UUCA by showing the film Suppressed. It's only a 36-minute film, but it will change your perspective on voting and voter suppression. It's amazing. So we urge you to come tonight, and the Zoom link, or the Zoom address, I'm sorry, is right beneath where it says Suppressed. And it's also in your chat right now. So that is our kickoff. And we're replaying this on the 22nd for anyone who is not able to make it tonight, but we would really love it if you could make it tonight. And then our next call to action is going to be learning how to write letters with Vote Forward. And we are also, sorry, I'm getting lost. We're also going to be, I'm also going to be sharing an action with everybody on the message, or everybody on the mailing list, with how we can fight to try to save the post office right now, which is one of the most important things that we can do. Because like Mickey says, the post office is under direct attack, yes. And so I will be sharing with anybody on the mailing list an action you can take to try to save the post office. So if you want to be on the mailing list, please email me at christymetchler15@gmail.com, and we'll keep you updated on everything that we're doing tonight. When will we replay? Somebody asked, when will we replay Suppressed? I will be replaying it on the 22nd, which is a Saturday at 5:30, I believe. But definitely send me an email and I'll get you on our email list, because it's really hard to pass information around. It's like a game of telephone. So I'm also going to put in the comments a questionnaire you can fill out if you want to be part of the UU the Vote team. And that doesn't mean you have to be part of the planning team. That just means if you would like to participate in our actions. So again, come back tonight at 6 at this Zoom address so that we can learn all about what we're up against. Thank you.
This month, we share the plate with the NAACP. I mentioned Arundel House of Hope last month, and there's a little error there, but the Share the Plate is for the NAACP, founded in 1909. We know that history, it's a powerful history of advocating for people, for all people, and especially people of color. So part of your donations this month will go to UUCA, and the other part will go out to the NAACP. The next slide is how you can give. There are many ways. We show this every week, and we have to. There's a QR code. You can put your iPhone on that. It does not work with Android, but there are links that Julie will post. And incidentally, anything in the chat that is posted can be sent to you after the service, so just request that. You can email info@uuannapolis.org and we'll get that to you. So there are the links, and now I think we get to enjoy some more music. We do.
March, march to my own drum. March, march to my own drum. Hey, hey, I'm an army of one. Oh, I'm an army of one. March, march to my own drum. March, march to my own drum. Hey, hey, I'm an army of one. Oh, I'm an army of one. Tell the young boys in their white bread lobbies what they can and can't do with their bodies. Temperatures are rising, cities are sinking. Standing with them ahead of sons and daughters, watching our youth have to solve our problems. I'll follow them, so who's coming with me? March, march to my own drum. March, march to my own drum. Hey, hey, I'm an army of one. Oh, I'm an army of one. March, march to my own drum. March, march to my own drum. Hey, hey, I'm an army of one. Oh, I'm an army of one.
Woo. I just can't believe the kind of music we're producing right now. This is just unbelievable. But we take a deep breath and pause for a moment to remember that we lost one of our members. Carol Schenker died this week. And if you'd like to send condolences to the family, you can email me and I will get you their address. Their address is also under Lou's name in the member directory. So please send them a note. And we remember Carol died from complications from brain cancer. Thank you. Next slide. The Memorial Garden is having an online gathering. We invite you to that. It will be on Zoom and Facebook. It's also in the know, so you can read about this. There are a lot of things happening with the Memorial Garden. We want to make it even more lovely. And so if you're interested in that sort of thing, we recommend you get on this call with Jenny Klockow and others. Thank you. We've been announcing this week after week. We have a date. I haven't told BBC, but the first Sunday in October, October 6th, is when we'll have this book discussion, and your ministers will be talking about this book, Subtle Acts of Exclusion, How to Understand, Identify, and Stop Microaggressions. I know that for some, there's some fragility presenting itself, and there may be some difficulties with reading this, but bring those questions, bring that misunderstanding or lack of understanding to the conversation. We grow together. And so October 6th is going to be that Sunday when we delve into this book and its challenges. Thank you for your support. We're really impressed at how people are buying books. We should have done this a long time ago. So keep supporting the bookstore. It is closing. We're trying to get rid of the inventory. We're selling stuff cheap. And that's all these announcements are in the know if you need more information.
And I'm Julie, and a lot of parents have joined our Slack channel. It's an app so that we can communicate. A lot of us are on Facebook having conversations, but Slack is a place. Not all of our parents, and especially our teens, our youth, are not on Facebook. So we're moving a lot of our conversations to Slack, and I hope you can join. I've seen some wonderful posts this week about how to keep your kids engaged right now during this time of physical isolation. And we're sharing anti-racist materials for families. So please join Slack if you can, and message me if you have any questions.
I'm going to ask Reverend Anastasia to share this slide. Someone's writing on the screen too. And by the way, October 4th, not October 6th. Thank you, UUCA members, for correcting me for the BBC conversation.
Hi, everyone. It's so good to join you for this tremendous service today. I want to invite you to come to our congregational conversation after service next Sunday. You could just stay on the Zoom call for this. And the idea is we were just forced moved into virtual church, but now as we're beginning a new church year, it's a good time to pause and to reflect on what we've experienced and learned over the last 6 or so months that we've been meeting virtually, and also to assess where our capacity and needs are right now. So I've noticed that generally we have less capacity when we're dealing with the traumas around us. And it's also really important for ourselves spiritually and for the world for us to remain engaged. So this is our time to come together to experience some community, and also to assess what's possible for us to accomplish in this time of COVID, and also what are we really seeking for ourselves, and what is the hunger in the world that we're really most urgently seeking to meet and address. And as a little heads up, if you're paying attention, there'll be a little prompt in the beginning, and you'll be asked to bring something that represents your magic, your gift, your personality, your history, your knowledge. So if you're someone who likes to plan in advance, that's a little heads up for you. And otherwise, you'll have a couple of minutes to do that at the start. But we really encourage you to join, because this is our way, in a democratic fashion, of making some decisions together.
Thanks, Rev. Brian Ganz is having a virtual concert, probably the first of its kind, August the 30th at 3 p.m. It will be live on tape, but more information is forthcoming this week. They will be asking for a donation of $10, and we're looking forward to having hundreds of people listen to Brian's concert. There's more information on this is also in the know, and we'll talk more about this in the coming days.
Let our belief in the democratic process and in the inherent worth and dignity of every person guide us in our work in the weeks and the months to come. And know, as Amy Morgenstern says, when we take fire from our chalice, it does not become less, it becomes more. So we extinguish our chalice, but we take its light and warmth with us, multiplying its power by all of our lives and sharing it with the world. May it be so.
We invite you, oh, sorry, Olga. You want to tell us what's going on next?
Hello. Yes, so our breakout groups after the service is going to continue the conversation about voter suppression. So if you are interested in continuing the conversation, just stay online in the main hall and we'll divide you into groups. Thank you, everyone.
Stay tuned for a trailer for Suppressed.
This is Melanie from Tech. So you're going to be put into a breakout room, but if you want to be in the main room, you just leave the breakout room and you'll go into the main room.
And whoever wrote on the screen, can you erase that? I don't know. We have to talk about that, how to lock those controls. But if you know that you did that, can you take that off, please? Thank you. So while we wait, let us greet our neighbors. Are we going to watch Suppressed first, Christy?
Just the trailer.
All right.
It's only a minute.
Okay.
It's not coming up, I'm sorry.
Well, you probably could search it on YouTube.
You should be able to press the play button in the middle.
Oh, look you.
On my mother's dying bed at 92 years old, former sharecropper, her last words were, "Do not let them take our votes away from us."
We are witnessing a tidal wave of voter suppression around the country. And Georgia, which is becoming ground zero.
Camp is illegally removing people from Georgia's voters list.
And my vote will not be counted.
My vote was not counted. Old people who can't vote, there's young people who can't vote, there's people in every county who can't vote. I'm not going to be able to vote myself.
Target people of color, poor people, the elderly.
We're human. We have our rights to vote just like anybody else.
This is systematic. If you look at what has happened across this country, 40 states have passed some kind of law to make it more difficult for people to vote.
Look at Alabama,
Arkansas,
North Carolina, Ohio,
Kansas,
North Dakota,
Michigan,
Wisconsin, and Georgia, which is becoming ground zero.
We are not going to let them take from us what our grandparents and parents fought and suffered and died to give us in the first place.
We are here to resist an ID law that is undemocratic, unconstitutional, and immoral.
Her last words were, "Do not let them take our votes away from us."
So now hang tight, take a 2-minute break, and we're going to begin separating you into breakout rooms to continue the discussion. Let me just say thank you to the Building Beloved community. Thank you to Melanie Keller. Thank you to Julie Berman. Thank you, Joshua Long. The music today with the ensemble and the Awake Singers is just incredible. This was a powerful service, so let's take that energy into the breakout rooms. Namaste. Greet your neighbors.
Hi, everybody.
Everybody, thank you. Wonderful service.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Good to see you, John.
There you go.
Thank you, Carol.
Everybody.